Today I want to talk to you guys about wedding photography timelines. This can be one of the most stressful parts of planning your wedding because you never know what's going to take how much time, what kind of time you need, and especially when booking your photographer, how long you need that photographer for. This one we're going to look at is a 10-hour wedding day timeline in this time of year in November when sunset starts much earlier than it does in the summer. Sunset is at about 5 this time of year, so a lot of your wedding day timeline gets pushed up a lot further so that you have that sunlight time for your photos and for your ceremony. So let's dive into the computer and take a look at what we have. Your day with photography is going to start off at about 12 o'clock. So usually for most weddings, when I very first get there, I like to start with details. That includes your rings, your bouquet, your invitations, all those little things get photographed at the very start of the day. Now your hair and makeup is going to start way before this. Your hair and makeup should be almost done by the time we start details so that at 12:30 here, we can start with the hair and makeup finishing touches. So at this stage, your hair and makeup is mostly all the way done and we're just getting those final details that bring it all together. Now with my 10-hour packages, they include a second photographer. Depending on your photographer, it may or may not be included. I definitely recommend getting a second shooter or asking your photographer about a second shooter, especially if you two are getting ready in 2 different locations instead of at the same venue, because for your photographer to go back and forth to 2 different locations and get you guys both photographed getting ready is going to add so much extra time to your day, whereas if you have a second photographer, your main photographer can be with you getting ready and your second photographer can be with your significant other to get them getting ready at the same time. So for brides, I have us getting into the dress here at 1 o'clock. That'll give us plenty of time to get the photos of your family buttoning you up or your maid of honor or whoever's really special to you that you want to have participate in that special moment with you. From there, both myself and my second photographer will go straight into bridal party photos. This I recommend that you do regardless if you're having a first look or not. If you can get your bridal party photos with each of you done before the ceremony, whether you're having a first look or not, I definitely recommend doing that. It's going to save so much time after the ceremony, especially when you get into family photos directly after the ceremony. It can get a little chaotic. So to have this already done and out of the way is amazing. From there, one thing that a lot of photographers forget about on the wedding day is individual portraits. I put this in my timeline specifically so that it's never forgotten because having photos of you just by yourself on your wedding day is so important. So I always have this in here. Now this specific timeline example does include a first look. I'm going to have a whole nother video all about why I think every couple should do a first look, why I think it's so important, and why I think it's so helpful just having your wedding day run so much more smoothly and you can get so much more done before the wedding ceremony, especially when sunset is at time like 5 o'clock. It's so early, you're not going to have a whole lot of sunlight. So to get that first look and get those photos done before the ceremony is a game changer. So if you're considering a first look and you're not sure about it, hit that subscribe button, turn on the notifications, and get notified when that video comes out because it's going to be so helpful in deciding if you want to do a first look or not. This is another thing that I keep in my timeline because so many photographers forget to do this part or end up not having time to do this, and it's the venue details. So getting the venue building, getting the reception tables all set up, getting the ceremony area before any guests come and sit in that area is so important. And so I have this built into the timeline to make sure that we get it done, to make sure that we have time for it. Now with sunset being at 5 o'clock, having your ceremony at 3:30 sounds really early, but there's so much that needs to get done after the ceremony that it's super necessary to make sure we still have some sunlight after the ceremony. In this example, we have our ceremony running about 30 minutes. That's how long most ceremonies go. If your ceremony is a little bit longer, like an hour, you can take everything in the first part of the timeline and just push it up 30 minutes and it'll work just the same. After the ceremony is when things always get a little bit hectic. We start immediately with family photos. I like to go directly into family photos because all of your family is already there. It can be super helpful to have the DJ announce at the very end of your ceremony for all of the immediate family members to gather nearby where the photographer is so that they can then direct the family and then you don't have wanderers that you have to go chase down and add so much extra time. Now you can see here that I have a note that the second photographer is at cocktail hour and then also in the timeline cocktail hour with second photographer. While I'm doing family photos and taking care of all of that, the second photographer is over at cocktail hour getting candids of everybody hanging out, talking, pictures of all the guests, little group photos, all of that kind of stuff, which is so special, especially on a day like this when sunset is at 5 o'clock. You don't have good light to get those photos of those guests at any other part of the day. And at the reception, all those photos are going to be darker and with flash during the reception and more so dancing. So this is a great time to really document all the guests that came to spend time with you on your wedding day. Now, since we did the half of the bridal party separated before the ceremony, all we have to do after the ceremony is the full bridal party together. So now we can get both sides of the bridal party together with the couple, and we don't have to worry about breaking them up individually. Now, the reason you want to have your ceremony so early is because with sunset being at 5 o'clock, that's going to be the best light for your portraits. Your portraits are always going to be the photos that you look back on the most, the ones you post, the ones you share, the ones you print, the most important photos of your day. So you want to have these taken in the best light possible. So I have those newlywed portraits starting at 5 o'clock, which is the perfect golden hour sunset light. Now, I don't usually use the full hour for newlywed portraits. I have it scheduled an hour here because things tend to go late. If the ceremony starts late, if we're missing family members and we have to track them down, it's so nice to have that extra time built into the timeline to buffer for that so that you're not running late to your reception or any of that. And if we do end up being totally on schedule, then you get that extra time for those extra newlywed portraits, or you can end the newly portraits early and go hang out with your guests at cocktail hour. From there, we're starting off our reception at 6 p.m. right around dinner time. It's perfect. You start off with your first dance, go into dinner, and then you like to give some time here for toasts. I like to do this a little bit after dinner for a couple different reasons. Especially if you have a videographer, to have the sounds of the plates and the people eating being recorded along with your toast can make it sound a little rough to listen back 2 years from now. So by this time, most people have finished eating. You don't have the silverware clinking and people eating and things like that. And also this gives your vendors and your photographers time to eat and, shove some food in their face before we start off with all of our reception events. Now, the rest of the timeline really depends what you want to have at your reception. This is just an example of what I've built out. After toasts, we can go into parent dances. And then from there, I have the cake cutting at 8 p.m. So you can see how much time we've taken up just by doing these small events and how it all really adds up to now we're at 8 p.m. and these events have been back to back, and we scheduled a little bit of buffer time for running late. But most of this is very back-to-back jam-packed, even in a 10-hour wedding day. From our cake cutting at 8 p.m., you go into all of your other special events. So the bouquet toss, the garter toss, the shoe game, any of those things that you're doing, schedule a little bit of time in there for that as well. And then we can move into open dancing, where we can get some photos of all the guests dancing and jamming and having a great time, and you and your significant other having a great time as well. And we only have an hour of that before the photographer leaves at 10 p.m. So you can see how even in a 10-hour wedding day, things are very back-to-back jam-packed. And scheduling your ceremony time around the sunset time for whenever your wedding date is going to be so essential to have that good light for your newlywed portraits and your ceremony so that your photos can look as best as they possibly can. Now, what's really great about this timeline example is that you can use this exact same timeline if your ceremony is at a different time, and just by shifting everything up or down a few hours. You just always want to make sure that you have your newlywed portraits starting at whatever time sunset starts. So if sunset starts at 7, you'll move your newlywed portraits down 2 hours and move everything else down 2 hours as well. So your day will start a little bit later, your photographer will stay a little bit later, but everything kind of shifts as a unit depending on sunset time. Other changes that I often make with this timeline is if your venue and your getting ready location are different. That can always add a little bit of travel time. So usually in between either our first look or in between getting into the dress, I allow for however long it takes to travel from your getting ready location to your venue. So keep that in mind as well. That can add a little bit of time to your timeline. I hope this was helpful for all you couples out there that are struggling with your timeline and trying to figure out how many hours you want to book your photographer for. And hopefully this can give you a better idea of how much time you really need for different things. Always keep in mind my number one tip: keep those newlywed portraits set at the sunset time. You don't want to schedule your ceremony at sunset because you will have full darkness after your sunset. With sunset, the good amount of light only lasts for about 30 minutes. They call it golden hour, but that second half of that hour is dark, especially in Arizona with the mountains. The sun tucks behind the mountains and it's gone. So stick around on the channel here with me for tons of other wedding day tips and tricks from a photographer. Make sure you hit that like and the subscribe. It means so much to me. And if you want to see that video coming up about a first look, make sure you turn on that notification bell so you can get notified when I post a video.